It is what's called a hall and parlor house, which is a plan that originally comes out of post-medieval England, but it's a one larger room, that's the hall, where people lived and cooked.
They moved the bed into where the fire was, and we also had a bed here I slept in. Okay. And then sister, when she was older, she went upstairs to one bedroom up there. And later on, I went up to the other bedroom after it got big enough. But in wintertime, most of the time we slept down here.
And then a more formal room, a parlor. The house is a story and a half, so there is an upstairs two-room living space up there too. It's brick and it's Flemish bond on all four sides, and Flemish bond would have been the most expensive bond to use. So although it seems like a small house to us now, it was really quite a substantial house for its time. For the early 19th century in Hart County, it would have been kind of a very significant place.
Wealthy antebellum residents of the Pennyroyal region, where Hart County is located in Kentucky, used architecture to exhibit their wealth and social status by adopting the federal style and building with brick rather than wood. Specifically, the federal style woodwork can be noted in all four mantels in each room. The doors of the northern and southern facades are topped with transoms, which are in turn topped with jack arches. The windows are also topped by jack arches and have deep splayed openings with reeded reveals.
The ones on the gable end are not original. And we can tell that from here, we can tell that because the trim doesn't match. This has a much higher style ribbed trim that, by the way, was hand done. There was a fellow who was creating his own plane. There was no machine help back then.
Shingles on the roof, and they took off. Of course, they leaked for so long time, and so he put metal roof on the house.
Also, a molded brick cornice tops both of the facades. The concrete block porch was constructed in the 1950s or 60s and has been the most significant loss of the integrity of the design of the house.
It was a long porch.
It ran the length of the house, built one end to the other on the house. The lower side of it was high up off the ground. We used to stack wood in the wintertime to keep it dry, and had a swing. Excuse me. Had a swing on the porch. We used it in chairs and things, and we loved it.
As you know, the courthouse burned, so it only goes. I've only been able to trace it back, actually, as far back as Jim Bush in the courthouse, and then from there, the deed, I think, burned.
Oral history tells us that it had been associated with the Gardner family. One of the Gardners did build one of the log houses that's nearby. However, the documentation that we've found does not confirm that it was ever owned or was built by one of the Gardners.
My working hypothesis right now is that George Coates, the original homesteader, his son Thomas, may have been the one who built the house, and that's based on where he was physically located according to his position in the census records, and the fact that his father was a wealthy man, and in 1820 he was the 26th wealthiest person in Hart County. This was obviously built by a family that had some money, because it's a very elaborate and well-executed construction, and the house has a lot of extras that indicate that it was a person of means who built the house. We found the typical things you would find associated with a rural farmstead. So we found a lot of artifacts associated with architecture, lots of brick fragments, for example, from the structure itself, nails, and other hardware that would be associated with the structure. We found a lot of ceramics, and the ceramics were primarily from kitchen wares, tablewares and serving wares like plates and saucers and such. We found glass fragments of at least 27 bottles, when we were doing our shovel testing. We found some coins, a marble, a metal toy part that looks like it's part of a little metal figurine, a soldier perhaps. And we did locate a portion of the kiln that was used to create the bricks. Is what's called a clamp kiln, and that's just another term for a temporary kiln. So this wasn't a permanent structure that was constructed to make bricks over a long time period.
These are the kiln sites. Actually, this whole area would have been the kiln. The kiln would have been a pretty big size thing. They would have taken brick that they'd compressed by hand, and they would have put it down, built sort of something that kind of looks like what we think of as an igloo, and lit a hellish fire inside and fired the brick.
So it was a nice perspective on the kinds of things you would expect to be discarded around a house in a rural setting, a rural farmstead.
The first one was repairing some of the mortar. Somebody had put concrete mortar in there.
We started off with a basic mothballing, which is essentially creating an opportunity for the house to be weatherized and yet breathe. So we capped the chimneys, we covered the windows with ventilated covers, and replaced one of the doors with an actual door that closed and was lockable so that we could keep out pests and keep out the weather.
The first major student project involved, among other things, tearing off a concrete porch that had been put on the 20th century that was also hurting the walls.
The second project that I did was a masonry restoration project. We had a lot of issues with the brick on the house. The brick were handmade right there on site, and over 200 years of life, the house just lost some of its mortar. 200 years of life and some inappropriate repairs, some cement-based repairs, had caused the mortar to fail. This stuff's about, we're not too worried about him. He's a tough guy, he'll figure it out.
So do they, for the modern stuff, do they use cement?
Oh yeah.
Isn't that bad for them? We have mixed water and limestone together over a long process, and like some of it's been there for 2 years, and then kind of re-added water to it today to make it more of a putty, to get it basically ready to put into the holes. There's holes in certain parts of the mortar in between the brick that filling in, and basically to get it ready, pliable to put into the hole, you just kind of bat it down a little bit, which makes it a little bit wet, and then you can kind of grab and it sticks, and then you can use that to kind of fill in the hole.
When I did a gutter workshop last fall, and we hung half-round gutters on this house as graduate students, and at that point I wasn't a contractor, I was already a graduate student. So it was just a great bonding experience for us.
Using the heat plate, scraping off all the oiled layers of paint, you get to watch it bubble as you do it too. That's interesting. But it is entertaining. You have to go ahead and scrape off the major layers as much as you can from the bottom up. There are probably 3 or 4 coats of paint, at least, as Tanya says on there. So you have to go ahead and try to lift it up from the bottom, then go back and get the original layer of paint that's pretty much melded with the wood at this point.
We hope that eventually we can use it as an interpretive center for the biological preserve to help interpret both the natural as well as the cultural history of the region. We haven't worked out a lot of details about how we would keep it open, and so sort of the short-term plans have just been as a hands-on learning center for our students who get a little bit of experience doing hands-on preservation kind of work as well as archaeological excavation.